everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna dye some sock blanks. My plan is to pre-soak these blanks, add some dye into the catering steam pan, and then bring the blanks in and rub and sort of blend the colors together. I did this for one of my 2025 Spring Mini Skein mini series as like a bonus colorway in a video. This really needs its own dedicated video because the effects are stunning, and I still need to do this on t-shirts with fiber reactive dye because I'm obsessed. Before we continue, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Cindy. Cindy, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope you're gonna love the blank that I dye for you. So what is a sock blank? A sock blank is a pre-knit piece of fabric that is created with the intent for you to dye it and then unravel it to turn that yarn into something else. And I guess that's where the blank comes in. Now it's called a sock blank because it's made out of sock yarn. And this particular blank, it's Stroll from Knit Picks, is double stranded. So that way when you unravel it, you'll get two matched 50-gram balls of yarn. In whatever random pattern you dye on the blank, you'll get that matched pair of yarn, so that way you could go and make two socks, but you can also use it to make a symmetrical, say, shawl or scarf or something like that. You don't have to make socks. It's just a sock yarn. If you want to learn more about the Stroll sock blanks or any of the other tools and equipment that I'm using in this video, I will have links and affiliate links down in the video description, and I may earn a commission if you make a purchase through one of my links. And I guess the last thing to say is that this yarn is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. Normally when I pre-soak yarn, I like to do it in just plain tap water without the addition of acid. However, today I know the technique I'm gonna do has no acid in with the dyes or at any point of the technique. The place where I need to add acid is now. So I think in here I'm gonna add, let's do 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. We may add more water in a moment. Now, one reason why I often delay the addition of acid into my pre-soaks is that sometimes I change my mind about the technique that I want to do, and so therefore I have more flexibility about when I add acid if I haven't added it into the pre-soak to start with. Because having acid allows colors to strike a little bit faster, and so this just works. Stroll is a pretty absorbent yarn, so you can get away with a really short pre-soak, but I think I'm gonna pre-soak everything for at least 30 minutes. Now I'm adding 2 skeins that are not blanks of Stroll fingering weight yarn. It's the exact same fiber content, and we will be using these as yarn mocks for today. And I know I haven't discussed the colors yet, but since my plan is to sprinkle dry dye powder in the pan and to use a lot of different colors, I'm gonna use a lot of different premixed colors, I'm gonna have dye on my gloved fingertips. And so we're gonna create some bonus colorways by wiping that onto these other skeins of yarn. And I have 2 yarn mops because I'm gonna do 2 blanks. But now as we wait at least 30 minutes, let's go chat about our colors. I use Dharma acid dyes for a lot of my projects, and on their website they have this like color palette where you can kind of drag the thumbnail of the color over to then play with them and see how they play together. Now the digital color doesn't always accurately reflect the color that you would get with, say, speckling. If you're using the dry dye powder, for example, it shows Caribbean blue as a lot more muted when it is more of like a neon blue, but it works and then allows me to bring together a list of colors with their names, because you can say to add it all to your cart and it'll show the list of all the colors you've added. And then I can play around with it to redo that little progression that I designed, but with the names on there, so that way I don't just have to look at the colors to figure it out. Because we are using a lot of similar colors, a lot of blues that some lean into purple, some lean into teal. Now I have swatched all of my blue acid dyes, and here you can see the dry powders. I've popped up an image with labels. And so a lot of these colors may be a little bit similar with using the dry dye powders, but they may also be different. And I'm just excited to see what we're gonna end up with using this very cool toned palette. Let's take a look at our dyes and get ready to get started. Maybe I'm ambitious picking 14 colors, but I think it's gonna be really fun. I am really, really excited about it. I mean, maybe it would be more beneficial for me to use like little itty bitty spoons to get like a little bit of powder out of each color versus using my gloved hands, but I'm gonna use my fingertips. We're not going for efficiency here, we're going for fun. We can do efficiency in the future if I wanted to scale something up. Okay, so our 14 colors, I kind of have them in little pairs. It doesn't go from like light to dark or anything, but the goal is just for something fun. So we have in our brighter category, Purple Pop, Electric Violet, Caribbean Blue, Baby Blue Eyes, Bright Aqua, Spearmint Breeze, Radioactive. And then in the darker category, we have Emerald Green, Forest Green, Teal Green, Blued Steel, Sapphire Blue, Intense Iris, and Deep Purple. And this is our palette. So now I just need to get my 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan, put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we can start putting the powders out to dye the yarn. Now, in doing this, it could be really, really easy to actually accidentally use too much dye. So I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit and just going off of what feels like a reasonable amount. And the goal is going to be to try to get as much of the dye on the blank as possible. Now, one concern with having acid already in our yarn is that we could absorb the dyes really quickly and not get coverage. But this is not what I saw in the past. When I'm doing this on a skein of yarn, like I'm using over here for the yarn mop, if a little bit more dye there. You want your hands to be completely dry before you go in the next container. And I am trying to spread out the dyes a bit on here because you don't want to have too big of a clump, because if you do, then that could be hard to dissolve. Now, if I was doing this on a skein of yarn, there are so many layers there that it is harder to get good coverage with this technique. And that's something that I just know, oh, that was a lot, from experience. Whereas doing this whole kind of effect on a sock blank, there's really only a couple of layers of yarn because the yarn is maybe like there's 2 strands held together, and then that's a given thickness. And so I couldn't tell you exactly how many layers it is, but it's easier to get good coverage, and we can always flip the blank over and add color to the other side as well. Whoa, that's a lot of Caribbean blue. You're starting to see why I prepared 2 yarn mops for this project. Okay, and we're not even halfway done with the dyes. Let's see. I think we've got some blued steel. Now there's definitely going to be differences between our 2 blanks. And the main reason why we're going to see differences between them, to try to wipe this color off, the main reason why we're going to see differences between the 2 blanks is that I'm adding a random amount of dye on here, taking what feels like a reasonable pinch. I know a lot of these colors really well. I know that the Caribbean blue is probably going to be a dominant color on here for us. But, you know, with each color I add, not only can I have maybe more of our teal green on one than the other, but in addition to that, I could spatially have it different and have it more concentrated or less concentrated in a given area. So that is just another factor worth considering. Now, I know my hands are not 100% perfectly clean. I highly recommend trying to make it clean, and so I do think that for most of you, I would recommend doing this with little spoons. I have these little spoons, some of these that are just like 1/32 of a teaspoon. And so maybe we'll use those in the future. I think I'm going to continue using my fingers here today. But what you could do is if you were to spoon up a little bit of dye, oh, that's a lot. You could spoon up a little dye, put it on the pan, and you could do that with all 14 colors. And then you could come in the end and then spread it out with your fingers, kind of doing one color at a time before you bring over your blank or your yarn to dye it. So imagine like the little scoops here that then you spread out. So you definitely have options. Now we do have a risk here that I'm going to use way too much color. Oh yeah, the emerald green is another color that is a spreader. Yeah, there's always a risk that we have too much pigment, but from experience, I think we're going to be okay. And I am very excited. Now, we could do something like this conceivably in the future using dyes mixed with citric acid inside various shakers. And that's probably what I would do to speed this up. And actually you could use sugar or something so it wouldn't change the way the dye struck. You would need to add more, maybe they would bounce around, but that would be a way to quickly boom, 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 add the colors versus the, 6-minute version that I've been doing here. And then as I finish this yarn mop, just trying to spread out this green a little bit. I know some of these colors are a little blended, but I think that our yarn mop is very fun. We may have more dye to wipe on in a moment, but now we're going to go get the blank. And I did rinse off my gloves. Okay, but now we're going to take our pre-soaked blank and try to carefully and quickly add it in, right side down, and we're going to start rubbing it. Now it looks like there's not a lot happening right now, but slowly we can start to see more and more color come through. And we can even come and press and sort of work these colors through a little bit. And I know that then I'm going to get some greens on one hand and move it on to that purple side and vice versa. But oh, this is coming together so pretty. And I'm doing this to try to remove some of the whites, but the colors are also, like, if I squeeze it, you can see that we do have some color that we can see when we squeeze, but also a lot of the color is in the yarn with the acid and everything we have already. Oh my gosh, how fun is this? Oh, this is so pretty. Okay, I'm going to flip it over now just to show off all these really lovely progressions and to see, hey, if we have a light spot, we can work those colors through more, but we also don't have to. This is so pretty and nice, and I think that the total amount of pigment I used was pretty spot on. We did a pretty good job. Okay, so now what I'm going to go do, it's okay that we have some light areas. We've got really good coverage. I'm going to go ahead and take this yarn, put it in my steamer basket, and steam set it for 30 minutes. And I popped it in a very similar way to the way I had it laid out. I'm using the yarn mop to just wipe things up. It's okay if we have some residual dye in here because we're going to be dyeing another blank. But why not? Set us up for success. Gosh, this worked so well. And I guess now I am going to go ahead and wait a little bit before we repeat this process, mainly so that way the steamer basket can free up. Okay. This blank is so pretty. I love the dimension that we have in here. Oh, interesting. Oh no, maybe it's just the purples. It's just interesting for me to see where like our brighter colors fall, and then feels like a lot of that bright purple pop is on both sides. Super, super pretty. All right, I'm popping this into a steamer basket, or like I'm popping this into an aluminum pan to cool. I do see one hint of like a purple spot up there. Actually, there's another red spot there. That could have happened at any point in the process because my gloves were going back and forth all over, blending things. So if you want to avoid transfer, that would be harder to do because also the pan has dry powders and like a powder from one could, like one thing could drop on the other side. But that's part of the fun, is not knowing exactly how it's going to come out. Now we have our first of our 2 yarn mops, and I'm going to let this steam for 30 minutes, or actually this one could steam longer because I'll probably add the second yarn mop in here before we add the second blank. But speaking of the second blank, let's go dye it. And now I'm doing the whole thing all over again. This is mainly so that way I can have one sock blank that I don't unravel and one sock blank that I will unravel, so we can see what that yarn looks like. Because yes, we have a gradient from sort of like green through purple, but each section is going to be variegated because we have a deeper color and a more bright color in each area. And the placement is a little bit random. So I think it'll be really, really fun. And you can totally see why I want to do this on a t-shirt and create a gradient effect. The one thing that would be very different is that, well, for one, I don't have nearly as many fiber reactive colors as what I have pre-mixed acid dyes. So I wouldn't be able to get as many different colors in our progression. But the second thing is that dyes bind to cotton way slower than they bind to wool. And so part of what gives us the colors remaining separate in our sock blanks is the fact that there's acid in the blanks, it's a superwash wool, and these colors are striking really quickly. And so in a shirt, I expect we would see even more blend of our colors, but maybe a little bit less variation. I still think it's worth a try, and that is something that is on my list of things I want to do, because I want to do it on like a tank top or something, because then I want to wear it. So I want that to be mine. Once I had finished rubbing this blank in, I went ahead and steam set it for 30 minutes, and then also steam set that final yarn mop for 30 minutes as well. And then removed things from the steamer basket to set aside to cool completely before we go ahead and wash it. I'm still thinking about using spice jars to do something like this, so I could use yarn with it, and then it would be so fun because then it would be easier to add more and more and more colors. And you don't have to use sugar, you could use salt. Sugar seems to be a little bit more inert. Salt helps colors spread a little bit more, and citric acid helps things strike faster. So it all depends on what's going to work best for you. But I am beyond thrilled with the way that this had come together. And the last thought as I'm working on this second round is that I'm using 14 different pre-mixed colors. Yes, there's some primaries, or maybe one primary in this collection. You could do something similar with a smaller range of colors, by also layering the dyes on top of each other a little more. So instead of keeping like a yellow and a blue separate, add some blue directly on top of the yellow in some areas, and that'll help blend to create a rainbow. And so if that's a project you would like to see me do, please leave comments down in the video description. Let's wash our sock blanks together in just some plain tap water. The first one that I did is the one that has a lot more of this neon green at one end. All right, I'm not anticipating any color bleeding. The nice thing about rubbing up dye powder while also squeezing on it is that that manipulation helps dyes absorb or help dyes dissolve in addition to helping it absorb onto our yarn. You're looking so good though. Oh, that makes me so happy. As we finish rinsing out the soap, one other thing that helped was that I noticed on the second blank, there was a big clump of, I think, sapphire blue that made it into the pan. After I removed this blank to go steam set it, that clump of dye was still in the pan. So it wasn't stuck to the yarn and giving us something that is a bleeder now. And so I think that that was something that was a bit lucky for us this time, but we've got no color bleeding. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop these into my spin dryer, and I'm gonna go ahead and start washing these yarn mops, which I'm mostly gonna do off camera, but just thought that I would show you that first little dunk in here. Woohoo! These sock blanks turned out so beautiful. They are both like a collision of tie-dye, random variation of color, but then also they give us this gradient that goes from like pink to bright green with all these other muted colors in the middle, and I am obsessed. I mean, just look how these colors sort of like swirl in and out of each other in the area. It is just got so much dimension to it. Now, we are gonna have a lot of modeling in our colorway here. And you can feel a little bit of this here, where it's unraveled a little bit and you see almost speckles, like saturated and less saturated. And that's because the dyes struck mostly to the front of our blank. And of course there's color on the wrong side. Here we have the right side of the blanks, and I can flip them to show the wrong side. We got color all the way through here, but there is resist from those knit stitches. And therefore, once we unravel it, we're gonna have sections of dark and light. It's not gonna be like a smooth gradient, but also we're gonna have variegated sections that go back and forth and blend these colors, giving us a colorway that is very, very much a fade. Because yes, this brighter pink purple ends, but then there's little flecks of it that continue up. And so each color kind of gets introduced and then is randomly distributed before transitioning to different colors. And that is so fun. I think that this is probably the first time that I've ever done some kind of gradient like this, where I had the deepest colors in the middle and the brightest colors more towards the outside. But again, I'm completely obsessed. I've loved this technique. You could do this with more than rainbows. We could have done this just sticking with blues, and it doesn't even have to be something that is gradient-esque. It's just the randomness and the rubbing and the squeezing the colors together blends itself nicely to a gradient. Now I know I'm talking a lot here, but we definitely have differences between the blanks. I would say the most obvious spot is here at this bottom edge. We have more of a bright pink here. The colors blended a little bit more on this one. But you can say these are the same colorway and you would look at it and say, yeah, absolutely. And each one of them is going to unravel into their own matched pair of yarn. And so it doesn't matter that the comparisons aren't completely identical between the two blanks. The making of each blank had its own yarn mop. So technically, we have all the same colors in here that we have in here. The biggest difference between the two is that on one of them, I started adding colors at the purple end, and the other I started adding colors at the green end. And so I don't know if that makes a difference with the placement of the colors on the mop, how that went down, because as there's more and more dye on the mop, then I search more for blank spaces to wipe the dye off my gloves. But it doesn't really matter because both are just really, really beautiful. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Cindy. Cindy, my plan is to send you one of the intact blanks, but I want to unravel the other one because I think that it's really fun to showcase the color progressions and the modeling that we'll see so someone can envision what the yarn looks like, because then you can maybe envision what it would look like if you worked it up. Because this tie-dye feel is not going to translate onto a pair of socks just because the gauge and the number of stitches and everything is going to be different. So the yarn will pool different from how we have it here. But anyway, Cindy, thank you so much for being my lab partner. The blank unraveled is so cool. You definitely still feel our color progression. Some of the really dark areas make a little bit less impact on the yarn because you can see sort of like these speckly, or sometimes I like to call them reverse speckle areas. What I don't feel like you can appreciate looking at this here is that each of these color sections is very variegated. And so it looks like you have sort of more of a continuous gradient here, and that's really not what it is. And that's why when I sell a yarn that's unraveled but from a blank, I like to include a picture in the listing of what the blank looked like, because looking at the blank gives you more information about how the color progressions will go. And it's like, okay, it's not going to be consistently dark purple across. You'll have some dark purple mixed in with some of those pinks, or this dark gray mixed in with brighter blues, etc. I need to take the yarn off of the nitty knotty. I will go soak it to help relax that crimp. But for now, I'm just going to twist things up so we can see the yarn next to the blank. Now, I like to go and soak the yarn to help relax this crimp that we have from unraveling the yarn, but that's not very hard. And then I can twist up our yarn to make it look a little bit prettier. But it is really handy using those PVC pipe nitty knotties to unravel 2 at a time. The 2 yarn mops look quite different from our unraveled sock blank. And there's a few fun things you could do. I can imagine like blending them together in some kind of way to create some kind of stripe where one of them the colors will change and then the other one stays this more yarn moppy one. There's lots of things you could do. But of course they also don't have to be used together, but they would coordinate and fade together really, really well. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I love to play around with different techniques. And sometimes there's something I dye as like a leave no dye behind or a bonus colorway in a video that then it blows my mind and I'm like, I need to make it its own star of a video. Now, I could have recreated that awesome rainbow I did back then, but I'm so glad I pulled 14 colors that, yes, still give us a gradient. But my plan was not for it to be the smoothest one because I knew the colors would blend to give us a smoother gradient. And I'm just thrilled where we ended up. And Cindy, thank you again. I hope you love it too. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thank you so much for watching.